The content you're about to hear may be graphic in nature. Listener discretion is advised.
Oh, how I wonder what it's like to relax. See the sky down under. Hope my plans collapse. Oh, how I'm under the surface of my tears, falling down asunder the meaning of my years.
This is True Crime XS.
I don't know if you fall down like the sort of rabbit hole where you're like looking for a piece of information about something that's in true crime news and you land on like a local, sometimes like regional or maybe even state site where like you're reading about that thing, but then there's many more interesting things happening in that area.
I would say that I do that. I go down rabbit holes, but recently it seems more like I grab onto a thread and unravel a sweater.
That's exactly where I've been. And I think people know all of this stuff. You and I will like watch an entire trial because we hear that something's being overturned, and then we'll go back. Where I'm at recently is Alec Murdaugh. He's got this whole thing going on with that trial where they're going to retry him. I don't know that it matters as much because of like him already being on these long prison sentences with these long adjudications. But like they're going to have to re-adjudicate the murder of his wife and son.
I really just want to know where that DNA came from.
Right. And so like that one question makes me go through all this stuff in South Carolina. And I like, that's where I was actually. That's what I was like hunting recently was, did anybody cover that? Because there's like sideline stuff happening in that case. And like, I never really understood how that case blew up like it did. So there's also like, in addition to like the actual facts of the case and the coverage of the case, like I want to know like why the coverage happened in the first place. There's this whole thing where one of the podcasters down there that was covering it from kind of the beginning and all of the different tentacles of that case, because you have the Stephen Smith situation, you have this whole boat lawsuit going on. That podcaster got found held in contempt and fined like quite a large amount of money because they refused to sit for a deposition in something else. And like, so I was like combing through all of that, and I came up with the stuff that were like the rabbit holes that we're going to go down today. This is like a mix of like dirty badges and then like, what is happening? Got this 1-page order in the middle of it all because I was like literally going through the South Carolina Supreme Court's webpage, and it was like about a judge being removed. And I was like, I can't not read that now. And then it just got deeper and deeper. So what I put together today are these 3 stories sort of surrounding South Carolina things that are like, I keep watching them spiral and they don't seem to have an end in sight. And a lot of times when this happens, it happens for me with like fraud cases or con cases. I go down significantly deep rabbit holes that turn out to like, some of them are endless. Like they're just bottomless pits.
Well, I will say that this type of, like looking at the peripheral cases, right? Like you were talking about to begin with, when you're just kind of looking somewhere and then you see this and that and the other. I never realized how much like content there is until we started doing that, obviously. But a lot of times those peripheral cases, they lead to much more interesting things, right? Than what makes like the mainstream media coverage. And I think the mainstream media coverage is, it gets started by the right person getting contacted at the right time. I think that's how that launches. And I have mixed feelings about some of that because of different cases that have gone big in the media that I didn't think they should have. And I actually have a lot of appreciation for some of the journalists that made that happen. And I'm not really sure why, except that they were just trying to get their break or whatever. I don't really want to go too far off on that, but it's interesting though, right? Like how some things blow up and some don't.
For instance, this week, and we're not covering this. I'm just saying this sentence so people know like where in time we are. As we're sitting here, like putting this episode down, Brian Kohberger has just come out with like this crazy handwritten petition to withdraw his guilty plea. And I'm not covering that today, but I like read that and I was like, well, didn't have that on my bingo card, but I guess it is like it's time for that to have died down a little. I think the only other person that might have like shocked me with something like that could have been Richard Allen, but he like legit went through a trial. Kohberger did not.
I just want to point out, Brian Kohberger took his plea on, I believe, June 30th of 2025.
Right.
Okay? And according to like the brief Idaho statutes I was looking at, I couldn't really figure out exactly how it applied because he took a plea. This is not a trial situation, a verdict situation. But
correct.
The PCR, the post-conviction relief period, it ends about a year and 40 days after judgment is entered. And so I'm pretty sure this is a timeline thing. I'm just saying.
Yeah, there's several cases out there covering it saying, oh, he just made the deadline. And I realized that a lot of people are thinking federal or they're thinking of their own jurisdiction. There's a lot of podcast folks covering this and content creators covering this incorrectly. And it cracks me up when that happens because they'll have like a lawyer on their show that's like from the wrong state or from the federal jurisdiction. And 99 times out of 100, they don't know what they're actually talking about.
Yeah, unfortunately, I see that too. Yep.
Yeah, and like I listen to their stuff, so I really can't complain that much. But like they don't understand what's happening, and like they also don't understand that this was the only way for him to reopen everything, and he had to do it himself because no attorney stepped forward.
Well, right, and so those attorneys and experts, I think, inadvertently kind of contribute to misinformation. And I don't even think they realize what they're saying is incorrect. And I'm the kind of person that when I think one way and then an expert, and I'm saying that in air quotes like our listeners can see me, I am the type of person that when an expert says something that I understand to be something different, I go back and look because I assume I'm wrong, right? I assume the expert knows.
Right.
That's rarely the case.
Yeah, it's almost never the case. And in this case, so for everybody out there, and I don't know where it'll land because I'm sure that like some of the bigger podcasts and YouTubers will be telling all kinds of misinformation about this. He'll be assigned counsel pretty much immediately, and that will go to hearing. Like it will immediately go to hearing, and it'll probably zip through the district courts and then stall at the appellate level, depending on the rulings, because all he really has to prove, and I know, like I've heard people already saying the bar is so high. No, not really. In this instance, they don't seem to understand that this is post-conviction relief request. This is not an appellate request. It's not de novo or anything like that. What'll happen is he'll get counsel and they will make hay of this, and he will get a couple of different types of attention. I don't know that it'll go all the way to a trial, but the bar's super low. All he has to prove is that he was too dumb to understand what was happening. That's the only thing he has to prove in Idaho. For those particular statutes to be met, he just has to prove that he was too dumb or he was misled. And I think he strikes me as the type of guy who was both too dumb and was probably misled, either by himself or by his attorneys. Anytime you're in a situation where the death penalty's on the line originally, like you get a significant amount of leeway in terms of relief and motions for appropriate relief and motions for post-conviction relief or petitions for post-conviction relief. It doesn't mean it's going to go anywhere, but you're definitely getting some court time.
Well, right. And anything that the court actually rules on with regard to a request for post-conviction relief can go to appeal, right?
Right.
So that's the whole point. Like, while his plea deal specifically said he could not appeal it, you know, besides the fact that that's basically that concept of no appeal has been basically shot down by our United States Supreme Court, right?
Correct.
In this case, it's the straightest shot. I don't know what's going to happen with this. I do feel like, just like you, while I'm, you know, it's still a huge tragic case with regard to the victims. I think that a lot of this is just another ploy for attention. But the reason that I came to the conclusion that a deadline was coming was because I was like, well, it was just enough time for it to die down and him to decide he didn't really like prison life, right?
Right.
And then I was like, oh, that probably means there was a deadline. So if I'm not mistaken, Ann Taylor's still representing him.
I'd have to look at that. Like,
I could be wrong, but
a lot of times they withdraw on capital cases once the sentencing phase is over, because most of the people in most of the jurisdictions that I've worked in, most of the people that are doing like the ground level public defender work are sort of divided into groups. So the first group handles district court. And then there are a lot of people that handle district and superior court. And I'm saying that because that's my experience. So district court is kind of, in a lot of places, it's where you get in the door and things start being said. Superior court, in a lot of places, is where the trial actually takes place. So that's your first group of public defenders. There are specialty public defenders who handle capital cases. So that they call them capital defenders. They come over when the death penalty is on the line to superior court proceedings. So then there's this other group of people, depending on where you're at, they're either regional defenders or appellate defenders. So what happens is the moment you close out a case at a superior court level, and in this case, the death penalty was on the line, the capital defender's office kind of lets those people go back to what they were doing. And the public defender's office sort of lets those people go back to what they're doing. And that case file, if it moves from whichever office it was at over to the appellate defenders. What's weird about this case is while it will be an appellate defender's case, it's technically not an appellate case. A petition for post-conviction relief started pro se requires a different type of defender, because they will be more like the appellate defender you would get to go federal, if that makes sense. Well,
right. But the fact that he filed a pro se petition says he does not have representation on that. I was just speaking to the Idaho statesmen. They sued to get access to the civil matter that was set up to track the spending
of his commissary or something?
No, of his defense.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
And yeah. Ann Taylor responded to that, because basically what happened was when Judge got the case, he assigned a different judge there to it. They had it listed as a civil matter, and that judge, the separately assigned judge, was responsible for approving or denying any funding. And everything in that case file was sealed. And after he pled guilty, after a little while, the Idaho statesman said, hey, we want all those files, right? We want you to unseal them. And Ann Taylor responded trying to keep them sealed. Now, it could be because she has an interest in that. I mean, it's a wacky situation. There's not even statutory law to follow on that.
Was it because it was ex parte funding that they were dealing with?
I don't really know. All I know is that the idea was this was going to be a huge, expensive case, and that the judge, who was the initial judge on it before it changed venues, he wanted an impartial party to be involved to either approve or deny funds, right? And the statesman is going to, I don't live in Idaho, so I mean, this part matters to me, but it doesn't really matter to me because it's not necessarily my tax dollars straight out of my pocket. But, talking about it, like the whole case, the Idaho statesman came to the conclusion that it was like $8 million. Not all of that would have been the defense funding, but it was a very expensive case. And so, they were interested from that angle because they represent, that constituency over there. And it's a local paper, right? But I do know Ann Taylor was the one responding in that civil matter, which it was the Idaho statesman sued for all of that, all of those records to be unsealed. And she said, no, we don't want them unsealed. And like, there's a whole situation happening there. It's interesting arguments back and forth. I realize that we've gone longer on this than, we plan to, but like, it's an interesting thing. And so that's why I don't know why she was representing that situation.
Well, but she still would represent like the spending of the case. That's where they're going. Like she would be the one that would be on the hook for, like she would have made motions for experts and things like that. I don't know where they're coming up with that $8 million number, but if they spent $8 million without that going to trial, I would be interested in that because, and I know they're saying both sides.
Yeah. But no, like $5 million of it was on Ann Taylor's side. Like,
I would have to see that. Like it is expensive to defend a capital case, but $8 million, maybe they're counting it as 4 capital cases because there's 4 victims. And that's how they end up like getting individual reports, life histories, and like it's expensive. Like it's extremely expensive to take on a capital case. Not $8 million is expensive usually. But I would be interested in digging into that.
Well, I was going to say, the Idaho statesman there's a reason they're doing this, right? Like they're looking into it because it affects who reads their paper. Like those people are the ones who theoretically paid the taxes that are covering that. I mean, the state stepped in as well. But if you think about like a situation, we've talked previously about how just about nobody that anybody knows could actually afford to put on a defense to first degree murder, right?
Correct.
Okay. And
it's like the top 2% of people income wise.
And so, when I heard about this lawsuit, it made me start thinking about, well, what if, public defenders, they use it differently if they have the opportunity. I don't know that happens. I'm just saying if she made $1 million, that's crazy.
No, I don't. I doubt that's the case. I mean,
and what I mean by that is her salary. If like she because the 5 million or 8 million or whatever, that would include everything, right? But out of that, she got a salary, and her team, every person who worked for her on her team, they would have gotten a salary, and that would contribute to it, right? To the final cost.
Right. But mostly mostly it would be the experts, the reports, and the consultants. That's mainly what you spend money on at trial. Because I'd have to look at this. I think I was talking about this with my wife this morning, and she was asking me what's the average like case hours that I put on per case. And I have to track those by the quarter hour. So for the most part, like a minor felony, major misdemeanor, or complicated misdemeanor, I have 3 hours. Most of my baseline major felonies, I have between 3 and 20 hours. And if it's over 20 hours, it's either something incredibly complex or it involves either a murder, attempted murder, or sexual assault. There might be some children's cases that are like right alongside that. And anything beyond, I'd say 50 hours is like some kind of major series of felonies. It's not usually one thing. But this is going to be interesting to see that unravel. That is a question I have about that case, is like, how was that money spent? And that might have a bearing on some of the future proceedings there. You were saying it was opened up as a civil case. Sometimes that's done so that the judge and the defense can have a single line of ex parte communication. So a judge can have communication with prosecutors and defense attorneys separately. And the reason for that is you may actually have to go to the judge and be like, look, Your Honor, our client's wackadoodle. Like, he's doing all this stuff. Like, he's throwing feces at the camera in the jail. And like, we need an expert to like come help us with that part before we can even address the case. Because right now we have to address his like current state of mind and his current whatever. And so that's the only type of communication you can really have with a judge ex parte of the prosecutor when you're applying for that funding. Because like, nobody's going to come see him for free.
Well, right. And I assume that the expectation, obviously, in a capital case would be that the threshold is going to be pretty high, right?
Right.
As far as how much it's going to end up costing ultimately. And I think that's why, not to mention, you want to make sure everything's done correctly. So an unbiased person saying, no, you can't have this thing happen would be better than the judge on the case doing it, right?
Right. Right. And so where that all sits right now, I'm listening to people say things like, oh, this is not a thing. It's a Kohberger has a nothing burger. And I'm shocked because there's some attorneys and judges I know commenting on it. And I'm just like, guys, it's Idaho. Like, they barely used capital punishment. The first argument that any good counsel is going to make is like, this was a nothing burger threat they made Kohberger when they said, like, we're going to take the death penalty off the table. I was like, that right there probably gets him a brand new spanking trial. And I was like, is that terrible? Probably. I mean, like, everybody knows now a lot of the evidence that's been laid out. And like, you know, I haven't heard anything that's changed my mind. I know a book exists that at some point I'm probably going to read just to see how wackadoodle that all is. But I don't think there's any chance he doesn't get several like swipes at being able to withdraw that guilty plea. And I mean, if any of this has been misrepresented or even appears to have been misrepresented to him, or if something is like wrong with him, because like that's the other thing about speculating about someone's mental health, like the entire internet did with Brian Kohberger, like that's fine. Now we pay for that. The reason that we pay for that is because, you know, there's 17,000 YouTube channels talking about his Snow channel and how he was autistic and probably mentally ill. And he put out this PhD level quiz about serial killers and how to get away with crime. Like, all of those things potentially get him more post-conviction relief, not less. And at the end of the day, it's a capital case. You're putting him in prison for the rest of his life.
Or sentencing him to death if
right.
it comes back around. Right.
And, you know, Idaho, from what I can tell, we looked at it before. I haven't looked at it recently. I didn't see anything that indicated they were really going to execute him anytime soon anyways. I think you and I were talking about a couple of different executions that are going on. They all seem to be from the 80s. Like, so we're like 40 years away from Brian Kohberger being executed. We probably have 40 years of legal shenanigans coming our way.
Which is unfortunate because to me it sort of demonstrates that once a capital crime has occurred, the victims' families, their lives are going to be largely engulfed by that, right? Because there's no way out. The thought was he took a plea, they don't have to deal with him anymore. Because if he'd been sentenced to death, they would have to deal with him endlessly with all the appeals that are involved. And so this is just demonstrating that, like, there is no end.
Oh, yeah, there's definitely not an end. And this is not going to go the way people think it is going to go, because everybody's talking about he's definitely not getting a trial. I am betting the first thing that happened when all this was filed is the state's attorney reached out to the victim's family and they let them know. In Idaho, it's very likely he's going to get a trial out of this because of the way the statutes lean, and because of like how this was all put together. We all kind of knew if he didn't take it, it could fall apart. And here we are. So my guess is, yeah, he gets a trial, or at least going to get the evidentiary hearings for post-conviction relief that will lead us towards a trial.
Well, we said if he didn't take it, it could fall apart. But like, he took the plea agreement, and he was very clear with the judge that he was doing it by all the reasons that are required for him to do it and not have repercussion, right?
Was he though? I thought he was kind of checked
yeah.
out, and then I thought a lot of people were yelling at him. I don't think this guy had the wherewithal to understand that he was sitting on the planet Earth.
Well, I mean, if you were going to be the defense attorney, you could argue that. But from the judge's perspective, obviously, the judge would not have accepted the plea if that weren't the case.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even talking. I'm talking about it more from a practical perspective. Like, if you want proof that something's seriously wrong with him, okay, he knifed 4 people in their sleep. There you go. There's something wrong with him.
I just wouldn't get too excited about this whole situation yet. I realize that that's impossible.
Oh, I don't think we should be getting excited about, like, I don't think people should be getting excited about crimes at all. I'm just telling you guys, like, more than likely, this kid's getting a trial now, which is ridiculous.
And I disagree, I mean, respectfully, but we'll see, because I do think that the odds of him being sentenced to sit on death row go up astronomically if he ends up with a new trial, right?
Oh, I mean, I 100% agree with that part of everybody's commentary, but everybody's saying, like, it's an impossible bar in Idaho to get a new trial after entering a guilty plea. It's a high bar. It's not very high on capital cases. One thing. You need one thing, and that just needs to be he didn't understand what was happening. And I promise you, Brian Kohberger, like the best paralegal, can figure out that Brian Kohberger still does not understand what's happening.
So
I'm not saying he's mentally ill.
Incompetent?
No, I'm not saying he's incompetent. I'm just saying he's a dumbass.
Right.
I think this 8-page handwritten document that he wrote and filed ahead of the deadline is sort of proof that I'm right automatically, that he's a dumbass. He does not seem to be on the planet with the rest of us. Well,
obviously that would be the case. I think competency is not a question here, whether it was to be tried, to take a plea, because those two things go right along with one another.
That's a high bar. Competency in Idaho is a high bar pre-trial. It's not a high bar after the fact, but it's also not about, like, is he competent to stand trial? It's, did he understand his plea agreement? And the only answer that he has to say to a judge to go into evidentiary hearings for the post-conviction relief is, no, I didn't understand what was happening.
Well, except he has a few things going against him there, because he was in the criminologist doctoral program. And the judge thoroughly examined his, cognizance to take the plea.
Well, I guess we'll see how that one goes.
Yeah, we'll see. It was, I'm sure, to everybody, it's a kick in the gut, right?
Yeah.
I feel really sorry. I can only imagine what all the families are going through. He's like a gnat that will not go away.
I appreciate people saying all that stuff, but, like, they don't seem to be that way online. They didn't seem to be that way at the post-sentencing thing either. They all seem ready for him to, like, get a trial. All of them. They're like they want him put to death. Yeah. They never wanted the plea deal in the first place. They want him put to death because they feel like the evidence is that strong. It's crazy.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is I feel sorry that it's now pseudo up in the air again.
Oh, I gotcha. Yeah, no, I don't feel sorry for him at all. You know what, guys? Kick ass. Drag him. Tear him up the whole time. Do it all over the internet. Do it all over social media. Have fun with it, because y'all are already having fun with it, man. Do it. Fucking tear him a new one.
I think
it's awesome.
Okay.
What? I think the victim's family having the chance to say all those things is awesome. I think it's way better than, like, sitting around and, like, being stuck in the grief mode of it all. Like, he's going to make this a public revenge situation, and y'all should take advantage of it. I'm serious. It's terrible. So
we'll see what happened. Yeah.
We started out with me talking about South Carolina stuff. We got over that for a minute, but there's like 3 crazy things going on in South Carolina that I had sent you and was kind of talking about. The first one is this order from the South Carolina Supreme Court while I was hunting around for something else down there, where they removed a judge. Did you see this?
I did, and I was like, "What the heck?"
So I sent you like the order, and it's really small. It's like 4 lines. It's like, nope, he's done. We've removed him immediately from his judicial duties, and that's it. So I had to know a little bit more about that. Unfortunately, by the time we're recording all this, there's very little. But this is like sketchy. This comes out of Columbia, South Carolina. Live 5 News had a little article from Colt Yergin. It's just a few sentences, but it addresses this. And I don't know how... heartburn. And I don't know how I feel about it. But here's the article title. SLED charges former Georgetown judge with unlawful conduct of a child. So this guy's name is Richard Todd Jr. He is a chief municipal judge. He ends up being arrested. Georgetown County puts out his mugshot. When you hear the words unlawful conduct of a child, what do you think that means?
Nothing good.
So it says the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division has charged the former chief judge of the Georgetown Municipal Court following his suspension on a child neglect arrest on Thursday afternoon. This is all July 30th that we're reading this. It says Richard Dana Todd Jr., 46, was arrested on Thursday after jail records say he is charged with unlawful conduct of a child. This is according to SLED. So I think child neglect, you left the kid in a hot car, you didn't feed him, you went on vacation and left him at home. Like, child neglect sounds to me like a step down from abuse to the left, where your ignorance or deliberate neglect caused some kind of harm, and those actions were leveled for abuse. And that is not what is happening here.
Which I feel like this is where it comes into play that he was chief judge, right?
Yeah, like, so I hear about things being overcharged all the time. I see things overcharged all the time. You and I talk about things that are overcharged all the time.
Undercharged doesn't come up very much.
Not really at all. Like, when you and I look at something that's undercharged, it's a rarity. It's like a treat.
Unless we're talking about like a traffic ticket, like being dropped down to like improper equipment, I don't know that I've ever seen very much undercharged.
I mean, I sometimes see plea deals that work out and kind of balance out the system, but they're rare.
Right.
Like diversion agreements sometimes, or deferred prosecution. Sometimes they feel a little underwhelming.
I think that everybody on earth will agree, at least in principle, that this is not the type of situation where undercharging should be considered.
Yeah. So here's what we get out of this. It says South Carolina Supreme Court Chief Justice John W. Kittredge issued an order immediately suspending Todd from his judicial duties. Chief Justice Kittredge wrote that based on credible information provided to the court, Todd's continued service poses a substantial threat of serious harm to the public and the administration of justice. He will remain suspended until further order of the Supreme Court. He was booked on that charge into the Georgetown County Detention Center. But the affidavit for this, to back up this warrant, has this line in it. The affidavit alleged that Todd Jr. laid in bed with a 9-year-old and touched himself inappropriately and sexually while viewing sexually explicit content on his phone during 2023 and 2024, those actions placing the victim at risk of harm and affecting the child's mental state. I'm not exactly sure what's happening here, but none of that sounds like good behavior.
It also sounds like more than just what he's charged with.
I mean, it does, but like, is this like the ultimate balancing act they're doing? Is this really a situation where he didn't realize? I'm picturing if your entire family is in the bed is this something that went on? But like, that's pretty explicit. Like, that's pretty direct information, accusing him of masturbating in the bed with a 9-year-old kid.
Well, not to mention the arrest warrant, like it says, according to the arrest warrant in 2023 and 2024, does that mean that's when the warrants were, or was he was just charged with this, right?
He's just charged with this.
Okay, so
they're saying that is when the activity occurred.
Okay, yeah. Well, so that could be also, okay. So because of the time difference and maybe a lack of evidence, and though it shouldn't come into play, the fact that he is in fact, a judge, a chief judge, no less. Is he? Well, he's a judge, whatever.
He's a judge.
And perhaps perhaps that's why the charge isn't like straight up whatever else it could be.
Right.
Because that is quite a bit of time, right? And
Correct.
So there's always a question of, the longer ago in time that a crime occurred, the less confidence there is that it can, not that it happened, but that it can be proven, right?
Yeah.
And so that could come into play. I could see that.
Well, it's interesting to me that we find ourselves like talking about something like this. I don't know. It's a little scary to me that we get to the point in time that a judge could be charged with something like this. I have to think there's something somewhere backing this up. Don't you?
Well, just to be clear, you're saying that like a judge would commit this type of crime to be charged with it, right?
Right, yeah.
Okay, because
this is all allegedly at this point, but this is not a low key allegedly. 2 years, almost 3 years.
It shocks the conscience of a normal average person to think that the people that we've got adjudicating criminals would be committing these kinds of offenses if it were to be true, right?
Correct.
I mean, it's hard to believe. It really shouldn't be happening. I do think now, I don't know about South Carolina. I know in other states that there's parameters having to do, I think it may be judicial officials. I know there's parameters with regard to the criminal complaints that citizens can take out against one another. I know that there's certain parameters having to do with like teachers and maybe some other public figures.
Right.
Meaning that like while normal citizens can take out arrest warrants against each other for criminal offenses, and you get a summons and you have to go, to court before a judge and explain yourself or whatever, with largely the DA's not even involved in, right? I don't know that judicial officials are part of that, but I do know that in some cases it's got to have a law enforcement officer attached to it, right?
This type of thing would have to have a law enforcement
I think so
attached.
too. Yeah, I think so too. And so, but I wouldn't be surprised if we end up with more charges and more serious charges.
I gotcha. Yeah, you're right on that. It's just when I read it, I was like,
no, it's weird. Like, it's really weird, especially since they go ahead and release those other details. And I think that if that information is in the affidavit, that it is aimed low, right?
Yeah.
Like the charging request is low, and like maybe it didn't meet the threshold for the higher charges. But in this case, I would love to know more background information, like what's going on. For example, I don't know this, but if there were to be a divorce and a custody issue happening, right? If there were to be something to that effect, I could see this being maybe less likely to be true, right? I don't know. I don't know all the information. And so that's why I feel like our system, while someone's presumed innocent until proven guilty, this guy's reputation is over.
Yeah, you never. I mean, people will argue with me on this, but like, you never really recover from this. If he were to be found completely innocent of all these allegations, that doesn't end.
No.
That thought never ends for, especially in positions where you have to be voted for and things like that. I mean, some people go on to keep moving forward with the momentum they have, but it is so rare that, I mean, I'd say 95% of careers and lives and stuff, they sort of end in these moments.
Well, right. And even the strongest, most, law-abiding citizen getting accused of heinous crimes, like, I always think to myself, oh, well, you just have to keep soldiering on. But like, at a certain point, it's so unbelievable. It would knock even the most confident person down, like a judge, right?
Right. And that's where we were headed here, was just kind of talking about South Carolina. This came out of Columbia. Obviously, he's out of the Georgetown area. He's over the municipal court. That's a big deal. That's more than just he's a judge. He's the chief municipal judge. That is really interesting.
And they're going to have to handle it in a way that doesn't call every single thing he's presided over into question.
Correct.
And that's interesting because how do you do that, right? He is only 46 years old. So yep. I don't know how long he's been in that position, but that's pretty young for a judge, right? I think.
It's very young, yeah.
And so, they're going to have to tread lightly because of that. And we don't have a whole lot of examples of stuff just because this is not what is expected. I don't know in South Carolina if municipal court judges are elected or appointed. Do you have any idea?
So this guy, his position, I went to try and run down anything about him recently. Hold on. Paletopedia. Richard Dana Todd. See if I can do this without pausing. It doesn't work down there. Hold on 1 second. All of my links in South Carolina are coming up. Access denied.
Mine just did that too.
Yep.
What the fuck?
I don't know.
Hold on, I can look it up. Maybe. Nope, that's not him. I keep doing the wrong judge. Okay. Richard Todd Jr.
Yeah, I can't get it to work. Oh, here we go. Jesus Christ. All right. Oh, maybe.
He was appointed by the city.
Okay. Can you just, whatever you got there, just start saying some of it?
Yeah. So the chief municipal judges in South Carolina are appointed by the city, the local municipal governing body, like a city council.
Okay.
And so it's not, that actually makes a lot of sense. It's odd, though, that the Supreme Court had to do it.
Well, because he's still a judge. I mean...
Yeah, maybe the council just didn't, or whomever the governing municipal body is, maybe they didn't feel comfortable with it. I could see either way. But he's suspended indefinitely, apparently.
Well, that seems right. He's been licensed for 17 years out of the Myrtle Beach area.
Yeah.
It was marked up that he was a government lawyer, but I don't know. Like maybe he was the city attorney and they appointed him, and there could be a conflict per se if they were to be the ones. I don't know. Their conflicts come into play. That's how you get SLED involved. So that's their SBI in South Carolina, is the state law enforcement division is SLED.
Right.
So I guess that could be how we end up with this Supreme Court of South Carolina weighing in on it all. But either way, like the city council technically would be in charge of the chief of police. So this went beyond that. They got SLED involved because they felt like there could be a conflict at the local level. And that's how we get to the Supreme Court, I think.
Well, there's also, I just realized I finally saw the actual order from the Supreme Court, and there's an appellate case number, so somebody did something lower.
Oh, okay. So this is moving up. I just saw that order in passing, and I was looking for something else in South Carolina, and I thought you would appreciate the weirdness of a chief municipal judge being removed and that affidavit line being dropped in the news and nobody really saying anything else about it.
It's one of those situations where it leaves a lot of people who have a lot to say speechless.
Right. And South Carolina's been doing a lot of that. If I can find anything else out on this, I might come around to it, but I'm not 100% sure that it's as interesting as I think it is. Like it could be something, it's either more benign, which means it's not as interesting. Like you were saying, like if there's a divorce or custody thing going on, or if some kid is in the family has recently had to go through mental health treatment and this is the thing that came out of it. But if he gets a bunch more charges, or if these charges weigh out to match the affidavit, I'm definitely interested in that. How a judge could find himself in that position.
Okay, and I'm unsure at this point. When I tried to find any sort of lowercase action, it looks like that the appellate case number is just the order from the Supreme Court, and that's the number they gave it. So I don't know. I would have been interested, in the lower. This is a very brief order, right? It's the Supreme Court of South Carolina ordering the suspension, and so obviously a lower court action would have the statement of the case, or it would have all the information leading up to it, which is not the case. I think that this might have been he was arrested like shortly there before, right? Like all this has happened
this
very
all
quickly.
ties together. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so it was probably just like, I don't know that it would be emergency, but it was a quick action of the Supreme Court, which, I do see that Rule 17B of the Rules for Judicial Disciplinary Enforcement, which is Rule 502 of the SCACR, which is South Carolina something, Administration of Court Rules or something. That's how they acted. They acted under that. So they have the authority to do it, apparently.
Interesting.
Well, that's what should be done. Anybody that's got, accusations, as long as there's evidence to support them, they should be removed.
Well, do you have anything else on this guy right now?
No, I really want to see, I'm interested to know what has taken place and how, I guess it'll either come out or it won't, right?
Pretty much. I mean, that's where I'm sitting right now wondering is this going to be something?
Well, the last time a judge was taken out, it was like by the sheriff with a gun in his chambers, like in Kentucky, I think.
Oh, yeah, that whole thing is still pending out there. We've never swung back around to talking about that.
Well, nothing's really happened yet, but you don't really, you don't hear about judges having action taken against them like this, right?
Yeah. I had this other thing happen. So I have a story that I want to get to, but I have this other thing happen I feel like I need to talk about. This is a small town, South Carolina. And this whole town, this area that this happens in is 1.4 square miles. This other thing that I sent you. Yeah, it's 758 people live there right now.
Again, very small.
Yeah, it's very difficult to wrap your head around what I'm about to say and why anybody's paying attention to it. But the state ran an article down there. This guy, Noah Fate. It says South Carolina mayor and high-ranking police officers arrested. Again, it involves South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, or SLED. It says the mayor of a South Carolina town, along with current and former high-ranking members of the police force. How many police do you need for 700 people? They were arrested for a money-making scheme that involved a quota for issuing traffic tickets. So this is a SLED release that becomes this news article. McBee, South Carolina, which is a little city in Chesterfield County. McBee, South Carolina Mayor Glenn Odom, 77 years old, and McBee Police Department Chief Timothy Knight, 51, along with former McBee Police Chief Michael Irvin, 52, and former McBee Police Captain Gregory Block, 41, were arrested this week. On Monday, the three current and former police officers each were charged with criminal conspiracy and misconduct in office. So just because we mentioned the misconduct with a child, I looked at this and I was like, what does misconduct in office mean? If that's what you get away with, child neglect.
This is that sweater unraveling. I'm just saying.
Right, it is. It's totally the parts of the sweater on the floor. I didn't even realize I was wearing a sweater, and now here we are. On Tuesday, Odom, so that's the mayor, he's 77, he was charged with criminal conspiracy and 3 counts of misconduct in office. So they arrest these 4 guys, they book them into the Chesterfield County Detention Center. That's got to be uncomfortable. The mayor, the police chief, the former police chief, the police captain, all in the jail. They're released on $5,000 personal recognizance bonds, so they're not in the jail very long. They were all posted either Monday or Tuesday, according to Chesterfield County court records. The charges are connected to a scheme that began in March of 2023 and has run to the present time. That's according to an affidavit that's shared out by SLED here. During that time, the arrested officials were involved in imposing ticket quotas and fines that were designed to make money for the town of McBee, South Carolina. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, the rest of this sounds like an episode of Dukes of Hazzard, where Bo and Luke were like going down the wrong road and got pulled over by somebody other than Roscoe P. Coltrane. It feels like that's how we get here, but just in 2023. So this Odom guy, he's sworn in as mayor in February 23. He had been on the town council for 5 years. In 2023, he asked the former chief to get officers to issue more tickets because they needed to pay down 2 federal loans around $178,000. Text messages show the mayor telling the chief, so Chief Irvin in this situation is not the current chief, he's the former chief, to tell a specific officer to make sure to keep busy issuing tickets and to stay out of town hall. He even mentions in these text messages to the police chief at the time that the police chief needs to be writing 4 or 5 tickets a day. So during this investigation that is taking up state law enforcement division resources, multiple local police officers were interviewed and said they were under constant pressure to write a high volume of tickets. They even have a March 2024 text from Odom to former Chief Irvin asking for 6 officers to do 12 tickets a month. That's according to these affidavits. So from 2024 through 2025, the minimum amount of tickets required by each officer was 10 per shift. South Carolina law prohibits a law enforcement agency from requiring any of its officer to issue a specific number of citations during a designated period of time. You know, that's a thing that like we joke about like a lot. Quotas. Yeah. Like officer quotas coming around at the end of the month or the beginning of the month. What are your thoughts on those?
The joke doesn't come from nowhere. Okay. There have been various times and places that they always eventually get caught. But it's a way of generating revenue, right?
Yes.
There's no question that when people get tickets, especially in like small town situations like this, like they have to go in and they have to pay their fines or whatever. And the idea behind it is that, you know, once everybody's getting ticketed, then why is anybody getting ticketed, right? And so
Correct.
the quota situation has been largely outlawed to the extent that it was ever really a thing to begin with, right?
Correct. In this instance, we're seeing kind of an example of it playing out like it's 1985. Well, you know, I have to wonder, like, how are we paying off this federal loan for 180 grand? And like, how much are these tickets costing each? That, like, if we do it this way, that's the thing that's paying off the loan. Like, right?
Well, okay, so my thought is, for one thing, having taken out a loan, they had to have already had a plan to repay it, right?
Right.
Except, like, where did that money go? Why did they take that loan? And why is there not a plan in place to repay it? And that makes me think the mayor got the loan, misappropriated the funds or something, right? And he's scrambling to pay it back, because you keep in mind, he just was sworn into office and he had been on the council for 5 years previously, right?
Yeah.
So he's had a hand in something to do with that money, because it's unlikely that I don't want to, I guess legitimate, meaning that everybody's doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. Like a council or a mayor, they're not going to take out a loan that the town can't afford to pay back, right? They're not going to do that.
I mean, in theory, yeah.
Well, that's why I said legitimate. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. There's all kinds of cases where things happen that shouldn't happen. But in this case, they essentially were trying to squeeze money out of the these are not people that need to be in charge, right? Obviously, the idea that you want to squeeze your less than 800 people population, right?
Yeah.
You want to squeeze as much money as you can out of them. That is not a great idea. If they presented it as a tax, we need to, like, we're going to impose a townwide tax, and the tax has to go to pay back the money, which, again, this is something that would be on a ballot, right? And people would vote on. Like, people would either say yes or no, and they'd either agree to it or not agree to it. But that should have happened like before the loan even was taken, right?
Correct.
If they didn't have alternative sources to pay for it. That's a lot of what I see problems with. A lot of times you've got these podunk just people on, like, running an important role, right? Like mayor or on town council, thinking that, like, oh, it's just, you know, a little bit of money I'm swiping off the top here, right?
We don't know that he took it personally, though.
Well, okay, but
at this point in the story,
he's trying to get, okay, the money that is collected on tickets is allocated to something before this plan ever comes into place, okay?
Yeah.
In saying what I'm saying, it doesn't really matter if we know that he took it personally or not. He's saying to law enforcement, write extra tickets because we need to pay off this loan. And so that means he's going to use money coming in that's delegated for something else to go towards paying off a loan. And that can't possibly be what it's intended for, because, you know, when you go in, all court fees and all fines and all that stuff, it's already delegated before it ever comes into play, right? The court
It should
knows
be.
where
It 100% should be, yes.
And so, in theory, you got to think about the underlying financial structure that would allow for extra tickets to be paying off a loan as opposed to whatever else it's supposed to be doing, right?
Right. Well, now I got to get into the
for it.
the Netflix limited series of what's happening here, because I'm here for it, and I would totally watch this, even if it was just like, a new season of The Dukes of Hazzard or something.
Yeah.
It says, okay, so these speeding tickets, because the location of this place, and you're right, like there's a very small town. We should have planned all of this. We shouldn't be relying on the citizens to make up for this downfall. So luckily, this area of Chesterfield County is like right next to North Carolina in terms of, like, Chesterfield is basically attached to North Carolina. So if you're going down and through Chesterfield County and you pop out the bottom southwest side and are going to do something else in the state, you got to cut through this little area. It has a couple of like historic preservation sites in this town where the railroad came through there for just this reason. So they're largely plotting to get like people from neighboring counties and towns and people from out of state. But it says that speeding tickets became the mayor's focus. And one officer said that the mayor sent former Chief Irvin to their home to ask why that officer was writing more seatbelt violations than speeding tickets. The officer says that the mayor gets mad because speeding tickets generate up to $440, but a seatbelt violation only gets you $25 per ticket. The officer went on to say that the mayor was manipulating their work. That included increasing the amount of fines, getting the officer to rewrite tickets, telling the officer not to take a driver to jail because that would be a loss of money, and telling the officer to leave a non-traffic related arrest to go and write more traffic tickets, all while keeping an eagle eye on the amount of tickets the officer is writing. So whoever this officer is that they're talking about in this affidavit says that in August 2024, they were asked by Knight. So Odom is the mayor. Irvin is the former police chief of McBee. Timothy Knight is the current police chief of McBee. So we've switched chiefs in the middle of all this. And Knight is saying you got to write tickets in Block's name. So don't know why they're doing this.
Well, but because
Captain
Block is the account that goes to pay off the loan.
Right, probably. So Captain Block, he soon talks to this officer and he says, we're going to need you to lie about helping me if you're asked about this. So on June 8th, this is 25 or 24, I can't tell. The officer is paid by the mayor while the mayor tells two other officers to procure votes in the 2024 Republican primary election for candidates specified by Mayor Odom, including a cousin. So now we're having them procure votes. The quote is, can you get your family to vote in the Republican primary? I'm going to give you gas money, $100 to haul as many as you can. This is in a text from the mayor to this officer. More text to Mike Irvin and another officer show that Odom tells these people working under them or subordinates to get more votes for the candidates of his choice. So Odom, for the record, according to all of this, is also accused of misappropriating funds seized from a private individual by the McBee Police Department. So this is one of the things that really got my attention. It says, during a June 6, 2024 traffic stop, officers seized suspected drugs and $37,584 in cash from the driver. The driver says that this money is legitimate income, but Mayor Odom immediately transfers $35,000 of that money into what's known as the narcotic savings account. On January 8th of 2025, so almost 6 months to the day later, Odom calls over to the bank that controls the narcotic savings account. he transfers that $35,000 out of the savings account into the McBee General Fund. So following this transfer, the balance in the McBee General Fund drops down to $871.97, which means that at least $34,128.03 of that $35,000 had been spent. Information about how that money spent is not available, and there's no word if any investigation is ongoing related to this in South Carolina. The case against Odom, Knight, Irvin, and Block will be prosecuted by the South Carolina Attorney General's office. Sorry, you go ahead.
I was just going to say that those numbers there that would reflect if there was zero when the $35,000 was transferred, which is unlikely, right?
Well, but that's what they're implying without saying in all of this.
Well,
is
right,
that
I
the
know.
general fund was empty, which goes to what you were saying earlier.
Except that if it was empty, why was it immediately spent? Like, it seems like you would want to have that on hand for other reasons, but we don't know.
You're talking about making good decisions, and none of this sounds like good decisions to me at all.
Well, and it also sounds like nobody is even looking into that. So, again, these are not the type of people that you want running a town. And don't get me wrong, any mayor, any police chief, any police officer told by a police chief, like across the United States of America, could do this, but they don't because you're not supposed to, right? Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And here's that type of situation. Now, I would bet dollars to donuts that if you were to say, hey, you can't like bribe people into voting, buy votes, etc. I think that he would be like, oh, I was just encouraging them to vote. I wasn't bribing them.
Right.
I'm just saying.
So Odom's got attorneys. They put out a news release. Their names are Mark Moore and Ben Gardner. The quote that's pulled from this is that the mayor flatly denies these charges and denies that he's committed any type of misconduct while in office. They say that Mr. Odom is looking forward to the clearing of his good name through the judicial process. Information about the attorneys representing Knight, Irvin, and Block, it says, was not available at the time of the publication of the State article. It says this is not the first time. Irvin was arrested on another misconduct in an office charge on July 20th. He had a $5,000 bond posted the same day in that case. In August of 2025, Block was charged with obstruction of justice and misconduct in office. He was released on a $5,000 personal recognizance bond. There were no previous criminal charges filed against Odom in Chesterfield County, but court records show he's had dozens of civil cases as defendant and plaintiff over the last 20 years. And they point out what I was saying. They point out at the end of this article, they say in 2006, the Myrtle Beach Sun News, so that's 20 years ago, they reported that the McBee police chief at the time, a guy named Joseph McLemore, and the town judge, Fred Stevens, they were indicted by a state grand jury on public corruption charges. According to South Carolina Attorney General's office, the town was dropping criminal cases if accused wrongdoers would pay cash or sign over the title to their cars. So some McBee residents told the Sun News that police were overzealous during traffic stops along US 1 and South Carolina 151, which is a shortcut from Charlotte, North Carolina to Myrtle Beach. Several years before that, McBee officials got into a dispute with a resident over a sign that he had posted near the city limit warning drivers about the town's aggressive efforts to stop speeding. So all of this is bizarre to me. It's all really over speed traps.
Well, but it's also like wrong, right?
Oh, it's definitely wrong. But I keep wondering, like, how long has this town been corrupt that we have this many people involved over the last 20 years? And, like, doesn't it feel like an episode of The Dukes of Hazzard?
Well, it does. I would say that this is not an uncommon scenario in a lot more places than just, small town South Carolina.
Yeah.
And it's all about money, right? That's all this is. It's all about money. I promise you that, well, if they were able to get all the information, they would be able to see. They would be able to see that somebody is using that money for something that's it's not supposed to be used for, right?
Yeah. Yeah, this is going to be a big scandal for a town of 750 people.
I mean, it just seems like why? Like, why on earth can't you just, do your job and do what you're supposed to do? Why does it always have to turn into something like this, right?
Right.
I mean, these places, obviously, if you only have 700 and some, if you only have 700 and some tax-paying citizens, you're not running a huge budget to begin with.
You shouldn't be, no. I find this interesting. I want to see where it goes. Like I said, if they're like, this is the type of thing that if they came up with a limited series, small town like crime drama about this, I'm totally interested in this because I hope there's no murder involved. But
I hope so too. I don't think there is. I think that would have been the headline.
Yeah. And so I have one more thing to round out South Carolina, unless you have something else about this.
No, go for it.
So, you and I rant a lot about cases that make it into the news, and I've always wondered how something like Ellen Greenberg's case sort of persists to the point of like podcasts and documentaries and TikToks and YouTubes about it all these years later. We talked about her case to death. I came across a case down in South Carolina that it's coming up on 9 years. And I have two different articles. One is from early 2025. It comes out. And I think I'm going to lead with that. But the second article is even more interesting. Have you heard about this case, this woman, Heather Turner?
Yes.
Okay. So here's what the article says at the top. It says, Paulding County Sheriff says there's resolution in a high-profile cold case from 2017. Now, this article itself is coming out of 5 Alive. 11 Alive. 11 Alive is South Carolina-based. It's written by Donisha Aldridge. It's actually February 20th, 2026. She puts it's actually February 20th she puts this out. It's actually February 20th that she puts... What the fuck, dude? Shut up, guys. Here's the summary of this case. It says on May 4th, 2017, I gotta pause it. I don't know what's happening. I can't record, but...
Well, it got louder.
Okay. So the title of this article is Paulding County Sheriff says there's resolution, high-profile cold case from 2017. On May 4th, 2017, Heather Turner was found dead by her husband, Andy Turner, inside their bathroom. The sheriff said Friday, 9 years later, her death had been ruled a suicide. So it's not quite 9 years. It's past 9 years now. At the time they are announcing this, it's not quite 9 years. But it says, after years of unanswered questions, Paulding County Sheriff Ashley Henson said his office is finally able to provide a resolution in a high-profile cold case from nearly 9 years earlier. On May 4th, 2017, Heather Turner was found dead by her husband, Andy, inside their bathroom at their home on Buck Trail in Dallas, Georgia. And I understand we're crossing over out of South Carolina into Georgia, but I was reading this in the South Carolina paper. Just saying. Heather's death has been ruled a suicide. As of today, this case is closed. So, had you followed along with this at any point in time?
Not really.
When I first picked up reading about this case, it was probably 6 years ago. The first article I saved about this case was from Cody Alcorn. and also 11 Alive. That was a pretty simple article where you could see the champion behind things, or the person that's like pushing. It says aunt of Paulding County woman continues to push for answers after niece found shot in bathroom. The article is titled, I Want the Truth. So at that point in time, the aunt was saying it's 6 a.m. on Thursday. The article about the aunt was saying it's 6 a.m. on Thursday, May 4th, 2017. Andy Turner calls 911. He tells the dispatcher, my wife just shot herself. During the 14-minute 911 call, Andy said, I was in the bedroom and I heard the noise. The dispatcher asked Andy, you heard her? He replies, and I found her. In the 911 call, Andy alleges he found Heather in the shower. He says, I'm getting her out of the shower. He also told the dispatcher he was going to turn the water off. During the 911 call, Andy's parents arrive on the scene before first responders. At about the 12-minute mark in the call, the dispatcher asks Andy's dad, you believe she's beyond all help? And he says, yes, ma'am. The Paulding County coroner, Lindsay Eberhardt, put in a report that officers arrived at 6:13 a.m., followed by EMS at 6:15 a.m. In her report, she states Heather was found naked on her back on the bathroom floor. She also noted a wall near the toilet appeared to have been washed. Eberhardt requested the GBI medical examiner take possession of Heather's body for an autopsy. And so that's the 2017 talk about this. And then in this article, they point out in 2022, 5 years later, her death remains labeled as undetermined. It's an open investigation, according to Paulding County Sheriff's Office, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. The Paulding District Attorney said he could not comment on any open investigations. Now, Cody Alcorn, he reaches out and talks to Andy Turner by phone on Friday, November 11th, but Andy refuses to do an interview. He says that the truth will come out, and when Cody asks him what he means by this, he says, buy the book, watch the movie. Alcorn asked him to elaborate, and Andy refused. Heather Turner's aunt, Sydney Klotz, said her niece was full of personality. Oh, she was majestic. She was so charming and so full of joy. I know everybody says she lit up a room, but just her sense of humor and kindness was outstanding. Alcorn asked Klotz if there was any indication that Heather wanted to commit suicide. Klotz explained none whatsoever. She would not have done that with her daughter feet away from her in the next room. Andy and Heather had a daughter who was 8 years old at the time of the death. The coroner's report indicated a note had been left. The report stated the note read, I'm sorry, I love you. Alcorn asked Klotz about the note. She says, yes, I believe Heather wrote that note. I believe it was stuck on something small long before she ever passed away. Heather was a note writer. She wrote songs. She was very wordy, and she expressed her heart. So why now would you not leave a note if you're such a writer and express yourself so thoroughly? Why wouldn't Heather have left a note for her daughter? This is her aunt questioning all of this. It says Andy has not been named a suspect. However, the Paulding County Sheriff's Office said he's not been ruled out as a suspect either. 11 Alive confirmed that Turner had declined on multiple occasions to have a formal interview with detectives. He's never been interviewed by the Sheriff's Office as of this time. Klotz said she just wants to know the truth. If it's suicide, call it suicide. Let's close the case and everyone can get on with their lives. Show me that evidence. Prove it was a suicide, and I'm okay with that. Klotz has said she won't give up until she finds out what happened to her niece. I can't not think about it. I can't forget about it. It just won't go away. I think of her all the time. Back then, they were still asking that anyone who had information, please come forward. And they were including the Paulding County Sheriff. But the sheriff came out in February this year and said he's closing it. Which is interesting because I think there's some weight to all of this. There's been speculation about what had happened to Heather Turner. The sheriff's office has faced scrutiny about how this case was initially handled. Her death has been deemed undetermined for years until now. Henson said after he was elected sheriff, the department once again took a hard look at the case. They also brought in a cold case analyst named Eddie Herman, who is retired from the Cobb County Police Department, to review the files in this case. Herman said when he brought on, he came in with a fresh set of eyes. He had no prior knowledge of the case. He said he only asked for the basics, such as who the victim was and where the incident happened, to remain unbiased. Over the course of several weeks, Herman said they walked through hundreds of reports, including reviewing the 911 calls. He claimed that half of what was in the case file had nothing to do with what happened the day she died. And he throws in the phrase, the investigation got off track. So he shares that during this review, they dealt with the direct evidence of what had happened in Heather Turner's bathroom and the direct evidence from Heather Turner's bathroom. Last month, Herman said the GBI and investigators also interviewed Heather's husband, Andy, about what happened that morning. So that's January 2026. The sheriff's office showed evidence photos of Heather's hand that Herman said tell a lot about what happened. He also went over the evidence about the firearm. He said Heather's DNA was recovered and identified on the trigger guard. It's the only DNA recovered from the gun. And Heather Turner's hands tested positive for gunshot residue. The results from Andy's test, which I assume they're talking about that day, because gunshot residue is only good for a couple of hours if there's no hand washing. He says that GSR test was negative. Herman said that as it relates to the note found at the scene, law enforcement confirmed that the handwriting belonged to Heather Turner. Herman admitted that he believes investigative mistakes were made in Heather's case, but he believes the evidence is sound. In the years since this happened, witness statements, memories, they can be affected, but this has not changed. Herman added that she squatted against the door and died from a self-inflicted wound. Henson read the amended GBI autopsy report from January 30th of this year during the news, noting that the manner of death had moved from undetermined to suicide. This amendment reflects evidence presented by Paulding County law enforcement and GBI earlier on this date and is consistent with the autopsy findings. This is according to the sheriff. He says, I hope the community, I hope the family and the friends and everyone out there can find some closure. He called it one of the most difficult cases the sheriff's department has investigated. So in a case like this, like that should be it, right?
Well, I guess if that's all you absorb, because an assumption would be made with regard to the change of manner, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I absorb that someone has put an incredible amount of time, at least that's how they're presenting it to me, into investigating what's happened over the course of 9 years. Right?
Yeah, I mean, you would think that, but I feel like in this case, that may not be the case. Just because sometimes it can be the case that when something happens initially, it is left hanging, open, unsolved, whatever you want to, undetermined, whatever you want to call it. And then when somebody else takes the reins, they go to close it somehow, right? And so in between, there wasn't a whole lot done.
Well, but I mean, you've got GBI involved because they're clearly the ones that are signing off on the autopsy. So that's the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. The GBI is the same thing as in what we're talking about. So SLED is South Carolina, GBI is Georgia, but they're the same state agency that assists local law enforcement when they don't have the resources to do a thing.
Okay, yeah.
Does that make sense? So,
right, but the GBI is who changed the manner?
Correct.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So what it says is, it says the GBI. Hold on, let me read I'm going to read the phrase. It says the Sheriff Henson read the amended Georgia Bureau of Investigation autopsy report from January 30th noting the manner of death moved from undetermined to suicide. Okay?
Yep.
Okay. This article ends with a question more than a closure. Like instead of phrasing of closure, Frasier, I guess you would call it, phrasing of closure does not exist. And I guess that's part of the point. It says, while the sheriff's office considers the case resolved, Paulding County Coroner Lindsay Eberhard Fuller issued the following statement. I have not been formally presented with the evidence or reports relied upon to this new conclusion. I will be requesting all of the investigative, medical, and forensic records for independent review. Until I've reviewed the totality of that information myself, I will not comment on the manner of death or amend the death certificate. After that review, I will determine what actions are appropriate under Georgia law, including whether or not an inquest is warranted. So this is all taking place in February of this year for something that happened back in May of 2017.
So that was
the last comment by the coroner in February, but there's been news since then.
But wait, I just want to make sure I understand. In 2017, the manner of death was changed from undetermined to suicide.
No. In 2017, the manner of death was determined to be undetermined. So that's what's on the death certificate in 2017.
Okay.
In 2025, the GBI did another autopsy, and in 2026. In January of 2026, they changed the ruling of the manner of death from undetermined to suicide.
And I initially thought, and then it got confusing, but I initially was like, well, law enforcement doesn't have the authority to change manners of death. But then I was like, well, does the GBI have their own medical examiner?
Okay, so let me phrase it. Yes, the GBI does, but the phrasing is on the end of the autopsy report. That's not the same as the death certificate. So you're right.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, right. And so I guess my point, what went through my mind was this is from... like the fact that they're saying it was a suicide and closing it, like it's from their perspective only, right?
The law enforcement is closing it because of an autopsy ruling by the GBI from undetermined to suicide. But
it's just on the autopsy.
That's just on the autopsy. So finally, we're a couple months out from that, like 5 months since all these announcements were kind of made in February. And we have a new article about it, which is why it comes up today, because I read this part on a South Carolina website while I was doing all the other stuff.
Well, and this goes more along with what I was thinking.
This is backing you up with where you were headed. That's why I backtrack and read it so carefully so that you would understand this part, like, is confirming. So Paulding County Coroner orders inquest into Heather Turner's death won't support the suicide ruling. So this is just coming out, okay? The Paulding County Coroner announced Friday that she will conduct an inquest into the 2017 death of Heather Turner, saying she's not prepared to support changing Turner's death certificate from undetermined to suicide because important questions remained unsolved. A coroner's inquest will allow a jury to decide Turner's manner of death. Jurors will have 5 choices: natural, self-inflicted, accidental, homicide, or undetermined. Coroner Lindsay Eberhard Fuller's decision comes about 5 months after the sheriff's office closed its investigation and publicly presented Turner's death as a suicide during a February news conference. Heather's husband at the time, Andy Turner, is the one who found her body in the bathroom and called 911. During the Paulding County Sheriff's Office press conference concerning the death of Heather Turner, the Sheriff's Office announced the closure of its investigation and publicly presented the death as a suicide, but portions of my coroner's report were displayed, marked through, and characterized as inaccurate. This is according to the coroner in the county. She says that requires clarification. It says Fuller defended her original report, explaining that it documented preliminary observations and information available when she responded to the death scene on May 4th, 2017. She said that it was not intended to serve as a final forensic finding. A coroner's initial investigative report documents the observations and information available under the conditions present at the scene. It's not an autopsy report, laboratory analysis, or final forensic conclusion. To characterize it as such does not accurately reflect either its purpose or its limitations. Fuller said she never arrives at any scene with any predetermined notions. She said the job is to follow the evidence wherever it may lead. When I responded on May 4th, 2017, I did not arrive assuming suicide, homicide, accident, or any other manner of death. I considered all possibilities and documented what could then be observed and what was personally communicated to me. Fuller's initial report documented what appeared to be an entrance wound and the possibility of an exit wound. She said those observations were based on what she could see at the scene before Turner's body underwent a full forensic examination. At the scene, I documented the apparent location of the entrance wound and the possibility of an exit wound based on what could be observed at that time. The autopsy later provided the controlled forensic examination necessary to identify the wounds and determine the projectile's path. Fuller said the subsequent autopsy findings did not mean her preliminary observations were false or improperly documented. That later determination does not make the scene report false, misleading, or improper. Later forensic findings do not invalidate preliminary scene observations. They reflect the normal progression of a death investigation from the scene to a full forensic examination. The sheriff's office had also addressed the projectile and a section of wall inside the home during this February news conference. Fuller said no projectile had been recovered when she documented the scene. It was later found during Turner's autopsy. She said, I mentioned that no projectile had been recovered because none had been recovered at that time. The projectile was later located during the autopsy. I further documented that a portion of the wall appeared to have been washed because that is what I observed. During the news conference, sheriff's investigators said testing found no blood evidence on the wall and described its appearance as to be the beginnings of a painting project. Fuller said she determined in 2017 that an autopsy was necessary and requested the medical examiner take possession of Turner's remains, which I think that's interesting. Not every death investigation by a coroner requires an autopsy. In this case, I determined that further forensic examination was necessary. I reported Heather Turner's death to the medical examiner, requested that an autopsy be performed rather than authorizing the release of her remains without that examination. The autopsy recovered and preserved the projectile and provided the medical evidence necessary to evaluate Turner's case and manner of death. The medical examiner initially classified the manner of death as undetermined. The autopsy resulted in this classification. Fuller said Georgia law assigns separate but related responsibilities to law enforcement, medical examiners, prosecutors, and coroners. These responsibilities include a coroner's authority to convene an inquest. Georgia law gives law enforcement, the medical examiner, prosecutors, and the coroner different but related responsibilities. The coroner has independent responsibilities within that death investigation process, including the authority to conduct an inquest as provided by law. Okay, I'm going to pause here for a second. Do you think she's seeing this and sees something that feels fishy?
I think that she was not part of the... I think that the fact that they said it's been changed to suicide and they marked out places on her report and said that they were inaccurate or whatever was said initially.
Right.
I don't think she was consulted on any of the stuff that came out in the press conference.
Right.
And again, they don't have the authority to do that. I guess GBI could say, like, here's this other autopsy report that has a manner of death listed as suicide, but that doesn't negate what the coroner did initially. That's what I was thinking anyway, because, in some case, we've talked about cases where, the family will have another autopsy done, right?
Yes.
And until the findings are taken into consideration by the coroner, like, it's just another autopsy report. It doesn't hold weight unless the coroner gets on board with it. And to me, it sounded like the sheriff I don't know if she had said, I don't agree with it ahead of time, or if she wasn't consulted and they didn't realize that they had to consult her. That seems like it would be it doesn't seem possible that happened. But to me, I think that it sat for a long time. And then I think it was concluded without her input. And I think it caught her attention because her findings were being undermined. And I have no idea if she had the opportunity to explain them beforehand or not, but she's taking the opportunity now to explain them. And she's not just going along with what was said. And in my opinion, if you recall, I said in Ellen Greenberg's case that they absolutely should do a coroner's inquest. I don't know if you remember that.
Yep.
And so she has to have some sort of baseline disagreement with something, right? Because otherwise she would change it if she saw things the way that they see them. Or if perhaps I could also see where she, in retrospect, because the cat's out of the bag, so to speak, she's not going to argue with them about it. They did. I don't feel like what they did was the correct way to do it.
I don't know, because it's interesting. So this article goes on a little further and it ends with this phrasing. And then I'm going to address what I just said was interesting. It basically says, the prosecutor's office. Oh, here, I found the wording. It says the Paulding County Sheriff's Office is aware of the coroner's office inquest into the death of Heather Turner and will fully cooperate as that process moves forward. The Sheriff's Office investigation was closed February 20th based on the findings of the Sheriff's Office, Criminal Investigative Division, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation Medical Examiner's Office, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation Region 1 Special Agents, in consultation with the Paulding County District Attorney's Office. There's more in this article if people want to go read it, but I've covered the bulk of it. What's interesting is I always wondered at what point a case could take on a life of its own. And it's this moment, because there's so many different people involved. And I don't know that the coroner is right or wrong, if these other people are right or wrong. I don't know any of that. I just know that something about this just became a debate, which means something about this seems like a mystery.
But I think that it has more to do with the press conference without the consultation of the coroner than it, because I think these types of debates happen all the time. It's just we don't see the in between because people don't have press conferences about stuff that is not resolved fully.
Why would you not consult the coroner in a way to get them on board?
If she was consulted, she may have been consulted and she may have disagreed and it may have been disregarded, because a lot of times people do not understand their role in things.
Right.
And as much as it appears that, obviously once it's out, there's pressure on her, right?
Yeah.
Once they've said that, what they said, that puts pressure on her, and she would have to fight back, and she may not feel like doing it. She may be fine with it remaining undetermined. I have a feeling that part of the reason that it's come to this is because at some point somebody finally realized that they had to get the death certificate changed, and she was like, "Oh, I'm not doing that." And it clicked with many of the different people involved that some things were done out of order, right?
Right.
if I were making this announcement as the investigative agency, I would have made sure my ducks were in a row before I started quacking. It does not appear that that is what happened. I could be wrong. They don't go into that, right? And which is very professional of the coroner, at least, I think. She has said that she's going to put it through the inquest. Now, how much does a press conference ahead of time skew the inquest, right? How many people actually have any idea of what we're even talking about here, right?
Right.
As far as
I know.
as far as like a jury being brought together, being presented the case, and then deciding like what is the manner of death? You know, is it natural, homicide, suicide, or undetermined or accidental, right?
Right.
And like, I don't know how many people even realize that there's a problem. Obviously, there is a problem with what happened because nothing should have been said publicly until it was completely determined. And once you have the initial finding, even though it could be preliminary, you can't just like they don't have the power to like overrule each other. They actually have to, you know, consult with one another, and it has to be a joint finding. And there's reasons for that, because you don't want someone to be able to unilaterally overrule something that another professional found, right? I mean, think of how that could go in the grand scheme of things. If you had the initial coroner said, you know, undetermined. Well, if she needs help and she wants help and she tries to get help, she's going to eventually come to an agreement with whomever's helping her. It doesn't sound like that's the case here, right? It sounds like a different agency, being the GBI medical examiner, just kind of took over the case and made their own findings, but that doesn't undo hers.
Yeah. Right. And, you know, I don't think I can remember a time when I ran into, because like we have this like coroner versus medical examiner pathologist debate. Kind of like, is that a resource that we need both of, or do we need more of this or more of that? Because coroners can be completely different than medical examiners. And I don't know this particular coroner's background off the cuff, but I do know this is a heck of a place to draw a line in the sand.
Well, but if she didn't agree with it, they shouldn't have taken they had to have her agreement.
I think so too. That's the whole reason I brought this up to you, by the way, was I thought like you get everybody on board to take a look at this.
Well, and I don't know that it occurred to anyone that the original coroner who has the original investigation wasn't on board, right?
Right.
I don't know that comes up until she makes her announcement, and she announces it, and now she did not, for whatever reason, we don't know what it is. She cited the law that allows her to do what she's doing, and either because of publicity, because of disagreement, because they didn't bother to ask her to begin with, or because she disagreed with them to begin with and they went against her. I don't know what happened there, but for some reason she didn't change the death certificate manner of death, and they had to want to do that once they had made this announcement and closed it as a suicide. And then she's the only one with the authority to do it. And she's like, no, I'm not going to do it. And that's how we end up here. I do think the coroner's inquest is the best way to resolve this. I don't know for certain, though, that it's going to be, I don't know that the findings will be the necessarily absolute truth, right? I do think, though, at this point where you've got, you know, especially, I would say mostly with homicides versus suicides is when it's going to come into play, right? Because there's always a chance, there's always a thought in a domestic setting that someone looks like they committed suicide, but they were really killed by someone else in the home, right?
Yeah.
Like that's where it's going to come to be important. And in this case, the idea would be either she shot herself or somebody in the home shot her, right? It's not like it's going to be anything else.
Yes.
And so those cases are very difficult if there's questions about it. Now, it seems to me like the sheriff had evidence to indicate, the stuff like the gunshot residue and like the questions that were being asked that by her family that kind of backed up where they were saying she wouldn't commit suicide. That's less physical evidence, more sort of just inferring like pseudo facts, right? Like, oh, she would have written a longer letter. Well, we have no idea if she would have written a longer letter. It's possible, right? But, somebody who's about to commit suicide may not be thinking like they normally do, right? And so it might make perfect sense she didn't write a longer letter to her daughter or whatever was being said. And so I think that once it's skewed in any direction, and I'm sure I know it costs resources and money and time and effort and energy. And so I get why a coroner could be hesitant to do it. However, once there's a controversy with regard to suicide versus homicide, a coroner's inquest is really the most justice-seeking way to make that determination if everybody can't get on board one way or the other. Especially when the coroner disagrees.
Huh.
Don't you think?
I mean, I can't imagine throwing a state level press conference with a county sheriff leading the way, presenting the state's evidence and saying everybody's on board, but then like isolating this coroner. Like, I want to know what the story is with why that happened the way it did on my Netflix limited series about this one.
Well, my guess is that he didn't realize that the GBI's medical examiner's autopsy findings couldn't render a new death certificate.
Right.
That's my guess. I think that he thought like they were doing like a whole de novo approach to the case. But see, that's never going to be the case. Because once there's an initial finding, right? Like, even though it was undetermined, he may have thought, well, she couldn't determine it. So like we've moved on, we're getting state level attention now. But it wouldn't make sense to me that would be okay. Now, on the other hand, he could have thought perhaps because she had left it undetermined and never went back to it, that she would be fine with whatever somebody else came up with, right?
Right.
That's clearly not the case. And it seems like they would have known that if they had consulted her about it. It seems to me like she did not know this was happening. That's my guess.
That's kind of how I feel. It's almost like she feels like she's been ambushed by this whole process.
Well, they put up pieces of her reports and they had crossed through it and said, like during the press conference, and they said like these were incorrect. And if they had consulted her about it and she had explained the way she explained in the article, that essentially like striking through her words and saying that's incorrect is not the way that process works. The way the process works is the preliminary report would be amended, right?
Right.
And so it's this evolving document. And so that to me says she was not consulted before this press conference happened, because
I think you're 100% right.
They explicitly, like, they were like, I don't know that you would call it picking on her. I don't know how adversarial this is, okay? I don't know. It shouldn't be adversarial at all. But because of where we're at, I don't know what the deal is. However, it seems to me that she has just made it plain that, okay, they've done all this. This is what was not correct about their assessment and their press conference release. And this is what I'm going to do to put an end to it. Right. And there's literally nothing that can be done to stop a coroner from having a coroner's inquest.
Yeah. A jury
Okay.
inquest.
A juror's inquest. And, you know, I've never seen, I don't think, maybe I have. I don't know. That, it seems like a rarity to me.
They are pretty rare. They run kind of like a grand jury does, though. So they exist. You don't always know that they're doing something, and sometimes they're not like a full trial. They're more like deciding, like, is this enough to move forward? This would be more specific because it's about like the whole Heather Turner case, it looks like, to determine if they can move off of undetermined on the death certificate.
Right. But all they're going to determine is what is the manner of death, like officially on the death certificate. And I'm telling you, she could see where it could be suicide, and just because of the way it was done, say, no, I'm not going to go along with it just because of, you know, public pressure or whatever.
Right.
But honestly, it's a little insane that it's very unprofessional that it was presented the way it was.
But we can't tell who. That's the interesting part about it for me, is you can't tell who's being unprofessional in the mix. I sort of defer to the coroner not wanting to hold things up without, you know, the proof or whatever. But it is kind of like who did this along the way? Which person is responsible for causing this to kind of go off the tracks and be unprofessional?
Well, I can see very clearly, because they didn't understand the coroner's process, that they didn't consult her.
So you think the sheriff did it? And everybody
Without
else assumed the
question.
sheriff would know how to fix it. Yeah. It's going to be interesting.
I assume the sheriff thought either she would be on board, the GBI medical examiner could overrule it, or that she didn't care to finish it and would just go along with it. Whatever the reasoning was, she took issue with when they said that she had done things incorrectly. So I don't know if that was a triggering point. It doesn't sound like it, because she's not. I don't feel like a jury inquest is lashing back, right? I feel like if it was really adversarial, she would be saying, I'm not changing it, right?
Right.
And then, I mean, it'd be very difficult, as was displayed in Ellen Greenberg's case, right?
That's what this all made me think of. That's why I brought it to you.
And it is incredibly difficult to get it changed. Right? It's incredibly difficult. And it's not a unilateral decision, which is what the sheriff did here. And, you know, in that area, I imagine that it was a big deal, right? And that a newly elected sheriff, I don't know how newly elected he was, but I could see where that would give him credence, right?
Right.
Solving the case. And if you sidestep things like the coroner, it's going to knock the credence down and some, right? Because that's like a whole thing. But there's a reason why statutes require certain things. And there's a reason why all of the different agencies play different roles, you know, and they all have to come to some determination. Now, granted, if let's say that they had found it was a homicide, they wouldn't need the coroner to change the death certificate to homicide just to pursue the criminal side of that. Now, it could be a hurdle that they would have to overcome at trial if someone were to be put on trial, charged and put on trial for the homicide, right?
Right.
But they don't have to necessarily get her to agree with it for law enforcement to investigate it. And I've seen recently where in these cases, probably largely because of things like this case and Ellen Greenberg's case and other cases like it, where it is a homicide, they treat it as a homicide until it's not, right?
Right.
And so that kind of covers everything as far as from an investigative standpoint, if you treat it like a homicide and it ends up being a suicide, usually you haven't lost anything. However, if you treat something like a suicide from the beginning, so when they arrive on scene, they treat it as a suicide, most of the time they don't have what is necessary to make a homicide case because they didn't treat it like that to begin with.
Huh. So this is one of those that, like, I would really like to sit in and watch a coroner's inquest, I think.
Man,
Like,
I would too. I was thinking about that whenever I looked into it for Ellen Greenberg's case. And I was like, man, that is something that would be very interesting. Not that I want like a lot of people to die and not have their manner of death determined, right? But I think that it would be, you would learn so much, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know like how I feel about this case overall, because like obviously we're just getting what they're kind of dribbling out down in Georgia. But I was immediately sort of sucked into the idea of is this going to be a thing? Like, if the coroner's inquest comes back and some big thing ends up being released, or they refuse to change it to undetermined, like what happens after that? Like, how does that get resolved?
Well, so she just announced it on Friday, right?
Yeah, we're just getting here. Like, we're just arriving.
There's gonna be some pushback on it. I would almost guarantee you. And it will depend on, because it has already been resolved according to the sheriff, right? Except like, well, if the death certificate says something different, you see where the nuances come into play.
Yes,
because like, so the sheriff has resolved it as a suicide, but her death certificate says undetermined. Now, to a certain degree, that wouldn't necessarily be relevant at this point. It actually matters if she committed suicide or not, right? Like certain things like life insurance or like...
Correct, like legal things, like, yes.
Right, or just the stigma, right? The stigma that happens with suicide, if that's a thing. I don't know. I think some people would be disappointed that their loved one committed suicide officially on paperwork. I personally, I don't know that I would care.
I don't care about any of that. Like, even now talking about it, I care about the legal part of it. Like, how do you handle the things? Because, okay, so twofold. Agreeing with what you're saying, and like, yes, there's a stigma. That is probably a thing. It's not a question for me. Like, the stigma sticks ever how this is resolved. And like, it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier. Once you say a thing out loud, like you were laying in bed naked with a 9-year-old, like you never unsee that. Like, that's never undone the way it's presented. So right. in this case, like, I don't know that we ever resolve the, like, was it a suicide? Was it not a suicide? And the biggest legal question in all of this, among the things that you're saying, is, can you even prosecute this now? Coroner comes back and says, hey, we actually found evidence of homicide.
Well, and see, that turns out to be a disaster, because no matter what, you've got this press conference with the sheriff saying that it was suicide, and that doesn't go away, right? Which is, again, why, like, that should not have happened unless everybody was on board. At the end of the day, that's why I think it would be strong evidence to say the coroner didn't make this decision alone. It was initially undetermined, and because of the sheriff's action in declaring it a suicide, the coroner presented a coroner's inquest to a jury, and the jury decided this, if it were to be homicide, right? And I feel like that would have a lot of weight if that were the path it goes down. They may look at all the evidence and say, yeah, this is a suicide. We don't know why we're here. The sheriff already said it was, right?
Right.
But I still feel like that's the best way to handle that, because otherwise you've just got like dueling experts, so to speak. Not that really a sheriff is an expert, but I feel like the sheriff took a very grandiose position here. I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong. But I think that the reason that this type of thing doesn't happen is because, like, you do things ahead of time to make sure it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Like, make sure the coroner agrees.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of ways they could have approached this, but I think they've definitely ruined a future prosecution. But I guess where I really am right now is I would love to be a fly on the wall of that coroner's inquest to see how that works in a situation like this.
Right. And, there's all kinds of ins and outs to that whole situation. I do feel like it's going to be a hopefully it's a learning experience for all of the officials involved that thought going down the path they were going, they had it all wrapped up. And I guess you can have a situation where you say it's a suicide and the death certificate remains undetermined. And there could be tons of cases like that. I don't know. But in this case, for whatever reason, the coroner spoke out and said, hey, no, wait, right?
Yeah.
And how much weight does it hold that the sheriff, if the sheriff had a press conference saying that, how much do the coroner's inquest jurors take that into consideration? Well, they shouldn't take it into consideration at all, right?
It's not part of the facts of the scene.
But, I mean, I could see where people pulled in to do jury duty would be like, well, this was covered in February. The sheriff already said it was a suicide. Why are we here, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't have anything more on this one. I just find the whole thing fascinating. Just how, I think the word you described that was the most accurate legal semantics describing the situation is this is a big mess.
It is a big mess, and it could have been avoided. And, I don't know what it says that we're here.
Right.
It worries me at times that we find ourselves in situations. And the other thing is, suicide versus homicide is pivotal in a case, right? It's literally, did you kill yourself or did somebody else kill you? Right.
Yeah.
And so this could go either way. And, the paths that divert, it leads to completely different futures for various people involved, right? It's very interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Because regardless of what the truth is, in this situation, it could be made to go either way. And then it brings out this whole thing like how much of anything is real and how much of anything is constructed, right?
Exactly. And that's so that's how I get here bringing this in with the other Southern stuff that I was looking at was does this become one of those things that now the case grows legs? Because there's a thing that happens when you turn the corner of a major ruling like this, and that major ruling causes division. In this case, we can't prosecute it. I'm 100% positive we can't prosecute this as a homicide locally. I don't think even changing the venue will fix that. And not from the perspective of what will other jurors or judges, if it were a bench trial, what would they do to have a conviction here? I think the bottom line is all you have to do is play the press conference, and the defense has automated reasonable doubt built into this case. So it runs on its own.
I don't disagree that it's a problem either way.
You got anything else on this particular case?
Nope.
We'll wait and see what happens. I'm dying to know if they actually do a coroner's inquest. That would be interesting.
I'm interested to know if there's pushback, if I'm correct in that. And I don't know that it would be public where we could see it, but I guess we'll know if it happens quickly or not. But I don't even know that they put that on the calendar, right?
Special consideration was given to True Crime Excess by LabrottieCreations.com. If you have a moment in your favorite app, please go on and give us a review or a 5-star rating. It helps us get noticed in the crowd. This is True Crime XS.
You fall like the stars. I break things like guitars. Thick skin, no scars. We're in trouble. We took it too far. I don't want to go, but it's 'cause I'll disappoint ya. It's all I've ever dreamed of, something I cannot let go of. I hate the competition, this culture's like a gym, and I lost the motivation to get fit in your expectations.
True Crime Excess is brought to you by John and Meg. It's written, produced, edited, and posted by John and Meg. You can always support True Crime Excess through patreon.com, or if you have a story you'd like them to cover, you can reach them at truecrimeaccess.com. Thank you for joining us.